Survival games are all the rage these days. You can't wander through Steam without tripping over games in which you're trying to live as long as possible in a harsh situation. Everything from badgers surviving the trek home to a full-blown military simulator zombie survival titles. And I find them pretty fun. Unlike zombie games in general, which are now frankly unenjoyable thanks to what can only be described as hyper-saturation, the topics and styles and gameplay of the survival genre keep branching out in new and interesting ways. There's a lot of dross out there, certainly, but as a genre, survival is pretty strong, and elements of it are finding their way into other genres as well. It's one such game I'd like to talk about this week, This War of Mine, a harrowing, very well put together title which draws heavily on the Siege of Sarajevo for its setting. This War of Mine eschews many of the tropes and practices of war-themed video games, and indeed many video games in general. You control a small group of civilians that has been caught in the crossfire of a civil war. The city they lived in has been torn apart by the conflict, and now the survivors desperately try to stay alive among the ruins, avoiding the military, starvation, and often other survivors. On the way, you can collect a wide range of parts and crafting materials that you can use to help in your quest. Rainwater collectors can help you stave off thirst, weapons can help you defend your home should you be attacked, and medication is also needed to help heal injuries, to name but a few of the things that are out there. Anyone who has played a survival game of any description will be familiar with this basic formula. If you're not, then it goes a little bit something like this. You start with practically nothing, and must scavenge parts from the world around you in order to create shelter, tools, and other caches of supplies that will actually enable you to survive. It's a classic example of risk-reward, with the reward being better equipment, more stuff, or in many cases, just good old-fashioned survival. The risk is that each time you enter a new area, you have no idea what you will encounter. Friendly civilians will trade honestly with you, a military checkpoint, a defenceless but well-provisioned old man. Even revisiting areas can be an issue as they change as time goes by. The game is split into two phases, a day cycle and a night cycle. During the day you can move around your home, building items, sorting out needs and so on, with the occasional random visitor popping up. During the night cycle you can choose to assign people to sleeping, guard duty or scavenging. If you assign a scavenger, then you can explore other parts of the city to try and find sorely needed supplies and a range of interesting little 2D exploration and puzzle-focused levels. You have to be careful though, as night is also when you can assign people to sleep, something which everyone needs. But you'll also want people on guard duty as well. As such, establishing a rotation is a good idea, as is the occasional down night if you think you can get away with it, which, in this game, won't be all that often. Combat is all but off the cards. You can get access to weapons, even guns, but the game discourages you from using weapons in a range of ways. To begin with, leaving weapons in your shelter for others to use helps to fend off bandit raids, which can injure survivors and result in stolen supplies if they're not repelled. Second, you're just some random person off the street. Many of the people with guns that you encounter are military or paramilitary forces, trained extensively and equipped with the latest assault weaponry. Or at the very least, AKs. Do you really fancy your chances with half a clip of 9mm and a pair of khaki trousers? I didn't think so. No, weapons are typically only used offensively if you're planning on picking on people who don't have access to weapons of their own. Combat is also pretty clunky mechanically, but given that the game isn't really designed around it, and it is trying to push an anti-war message, and gives you plenty of alternatives where possible, this is a very forgivable flaw in my opinion. Hell, I played this game for hours before I even tried the combat system. It's simple enough, you just select your weapon and then click repeatedly on whatever you want to die. Crafting is your basic survival formula. Combine parts according to a recipe on an appropriate workbench type, wait for a little bit of time, and voila, you now own a radio. Upgrade your different types of workbench and you'll be able to access better quality gear and more options. In the early game, your focus is just on survival, making knives, patching up holes in your shelter, and getting the basics of Maslow's hierarchy out. As the game advances though, you can gain access to producing trade goods and even growing your own food, but you'll also start to get more desperate as you pick more and more of the city bare, and sooner or later you may well have to do something that doesn't sit well with you. Because ethics are fine, but you can't eat them. This War of Mine deals with morality in a way that very few games do these days. So many titles just make one very simple mistake when you're playing as the bad guy, that the bad guy thinks they're the bad guy. In reality, to quote JMS, nobody sees a monster when they look in the mirror. People who do horrible or unpleasant things typically still consider themselves moral, or they rationalise immoral actions into moral ones, or they find ways to excuse themselves. Dangerous people won't factor morality into their actions at all, and it takes an extremely disturbed mind to actively seek to do immoral things without some sort of rationalisation. As such, when this war of mine puts you in situations where your survival becomes contingent on someone else having a very, very bad day, there's no fanfare. There's no renegade interrupt. There is only a situation, what you as a player make of that situation, and how you decide to rationalise your actions afterwards. You can, if you so desire, simply play a min-max game, treating everything that you encounter as an agent in a game with no frame of reference to right or wrong, just what's available and how best to get it. The game won't judge you, but there are consequences. Your survivors are people, and as people they have opinions and thoughts on their actions and the world around them. Helping your fellow humans can be a huge boost to the mental health of the group, and likewise screwing over innocent people can be to its detriment. Character bios are often updated with the thoughts and feelings on what has been happening, including rationalisation for things that characters have done wrong. It's very disturbing when you as a player try to explain away one of your more morally questionable decisions, only to find that the character in-game is following your thoughts exactly. This sort of passive, non-judgmental approach is much more powerful and emotionally harrowing than the standard black and white morality employed by most games. While a game like Mass Effect or Dragon Age might make a big hoo-ha about your moral choices, this war of mine knows that simply leaving you to stew in your own guilt is far more potent. It's that component of this war of mine that makes it such a powerful experience. As a game, it's pretty good. 7 out of 10. Stiff combat, but solid exploration. A nice sense of balance, which is always important for a survival game. Good range of stuff to do at the base. A bit of a wiki game at times, as information feedback could be a little bit better. But when you take a reasonably solid piece of game design and then very carefully wrap it up in a dark, oppressive aesthetic with creepy, haunting soundscapes, excellent writing, and some genuine, emotionally challenging moments, it becomes so much more. This war of mine is a prime example of why video games are not just all about the mechanics, and why presentation, theme, and narrative really can make a huge difference, and I say this as someone who typically plays video games for the mechanical components alone. This war of mine is an important game. It has more artistic merit, cultural value, and it advances the medium more than any £40, $60 AAA title I've seen recently. At £15, this is a no-brainer for anyone who values video games as an artistic medium. It's a fantastic example of how you can use the interactivity of games to make a point in a manner that would be utterly impossible in traditional media. If you're the sort of person who just wants to get stuck into the mechanics of a game, then there are probably better options, even within the genre. But if you feel like you might want to push your horizons and enjoy something a bit more emotional than logical, then you can do a hell of a lot worse in this price range. This War of Mine was developed and published by 11-Bit Studios and distributed by Deep Silver. It's available on Steam for $14.99 along with a pay-what-you-want DLC art pack, the proceeds of which 11-Bit Studios are donating to the charity War Child. For now, I'm Evis T, signing off. Hey everybody! Speaking of charities, my friend Jake is currently doing the Live Below the Line challenge, where he's attempting to live on £1 a day. And this challenge is for raising awareness of extreme poverty and also to raise money for the charities that combat it. So right here you should now see a link to his donation page. I'd encourage you to go and check it out. Have a look at the charities that the project is supporting, and maybe you'll want to give it a try yourself. But for now, I'm Evis T, signing off for real this time.